Canna decided that her brother had become so bold that he was ready to get into an altercation with her without even inspecting the balcony for strangers. The guy walked over to the railing. He apologized benevolently for not expecting to meet someone on the street at a late hour. Suddenly, the guy smiled and paid a compliment. He was delighted with the beauty of the girl and did not expect to meet her. Canna was shocked, the way her brother lowered his voice and compliments did not connect in her head, and she decided that he was definitely crazy. Looking at the guy from behind her bangs, the girl realized that he definitely did not recognize her, which is why he behaved so freely. The girl was in no hurry to enter into a dialogue, but this did not stop the guy, and he again began to demonstrate his sensual nature. Noticing that the night was beautiful tonight, he stared at the girl, waiting for at least some answer. Canna still pressed her palm to her face. The thought that her brother did not recognize her relaxed her, but she did not want to reveal all the cards ahead of time. Thoughts raged inside the girl. From the compliment that she was a beautiful lady, she felt sick. But most likely her brother succumbed to the illusion that in the light of the night, the girl's black hair was just a shade of blonde. Canna did not think that Orsini was subject to such foolish conclusions, and not to recognize in the dark the hair and eyes of his sister, whom he despised so much, was an incredible event. Suddenly, the girl had the idea that she could take advantage of her brother's position and play a cruel joke on him. So she laughed lightly and accepted a compliment from him. The guy was inspired, of course. He had shown courtesy to girls before, but this one made a strong impression on him, and her interest in him was a great achievement for Orsini. Canna tried to moderate the guy's views. She brushed off his excessive courtesy and admitted that she was not yet used to a large number of compliments because she attended social events very rarely. Playing along with the guy, Canna said that her visit today was an exception, but even this banquet was not a suitable place for her. Orsini remarked that they were very similar, as he didn't like such events either, but Canna caught the lie in this, because all Orsini likes to do is drink and have fun. The guy decided to interest the girl and offered to walk with him in the garden. The longer Orsini did not understand the deception, the more cheerful Canna became, so she could not miss the opportunity for a walk. The girl could not believe that the guy's whole mind could disappear at the sight of a beautiful face, but that would be her revenge. Taking the guy's hand, the girl decided that when he found out the truth, his heart would sink into colossal despair, because the one he had despised for many years would turn out to be the girl he had just showered with compliments. At such a late hour, the garden was an empty place, so Canna and Orsini did not meet anyone along the way. However, this did not get rid of the views from the palace when Duke Valentino, together with a friend, watched the girls walk from the balcony. Argon, the first prince of the empire, noted why it did not matter to Sylvienne that someone was going for a night walk with his wife. The prince was sure that it was the duke's wife because he remembered her dress. The image of Canna was unforgettable, so even from the balcony he could not stop watching the girl. He knew that Duke Valentino had recently arrived at the banquet and had not seen his wife accompanied by Cullen, but he could not understand how the duke could be so cold to such beauty. Turning away from the garden, the prince joked with the duke that he was in trouble if he did not see his wife as beautiful. Suddenly, Duke Valentino, because of the prince's words, remembered the night when, after the wedding, Canna made her way into his bedroom. At that time, the girl was very modest, but the way she demandingly asked her husband to fulfill his marital duties surprised the duke a little. That night, he realized that he didn't care about his wife, so he didn't leave her in his bedroom. The voice of the prince pulled out of the man's memories, who did not hesitate to reason that he would definitely prefer a girl like Canna. Taking one last look at the garden, Argon admitted that he had not considered who the girl had gone there with, but from the stranger's polite manners, he knew that the couple was going to have fun alone. The prince was interested in the duke's reaction, although he drank wine in silence, but somewhere deep down he cared about who his wife had left with. Argon grinned when the duke looked at him, but said nothing but a comment about the marriage. The walk with Orsini was a long one. Now the couple reached the central gazebo in the garden. The guy admitted that he is not like all aristocrats, and he does not need several wives, because he wants to devote himself to one single woman. At first, Canna was amused by his thoughts, but then she was taken aback, because knowing Orsini, his wife would collapse if he became the head of the family. Casting a quick glance at the guy's face, it seemed to the girl for a second that his face was incredibly beautifully illuminated in the light of the moon. Quickly turning away, Kana reined in her thoughts, because it was not in her interest to think about the beauty of such a bastard as Orsini. Noticing the girl's embarrassed look, Orsini decided that his words had an effect on her, so for persuasiveness, he added that his goal would be to make his wife the happiest in the empire. Kana noticed her brother's emotionality, but she knew him too well to believe his words even in such an environment, because Orsini's whole life was superficial, and such heartfelt speeches were not his style. Suddenly Orsini stopped and turned to the girl. He was embarrassed, but for some reason he wanted to justify his words about marriage. The guy admitted that before their meeting, he had never thought about family, and his confession convinced Kana that she was not mistaken in her brother's habits. Having revealed the lie, Orsini lowered his gaze to the ground so as not to see, as he thought, the sad face of the girl. Clenching his palms into fists, he declared that he had always despised men who impressed women with such speeches, but that he himself had become such a man today. Gathering his strength, Orsini admitted that he did this only because he fell in love with the girl at first sight. The unexpected statement stunned Kana. She realized that her game had gone too far. But now that the guy was on her hook, she was glad that he had just dug himself a hole into which she would throw him. The anticipation of how Orsini would suffer from this unfortunate acquaintance for the rest of his life warmed Kana's heart, for Orsini had never felt such shame as she had prepared for him. The guy realized that he did not recognize the name of the stranger and decided to make up for this omission. Suddenly, Kana's loud laughter rang out in the garden, but there was no lightness in this laughter. Rather, even the girl tried to hold back the hysteria that was breaking free. The guy was perplexed because the girl's laughter did not stop, and he definitely could not say something funny at that moment. Orsini's fear made him shake and felt a lot of emotions, but he didn't know why the girl was laughing at his feelings. After catching her breath a little, Kana stopped laughing hysterically. The whole situation should have ended by now. Turning to her brother, the girl asked him why she was the only one who found this situation funny. And only after these words, the guy realized that the sly glance thrown in his direction was similar to the look of his sister. The guy was in a panic. He had never felt so vulnerable, and he had never revealed his feelings before. But Kana had already felt the strength of her position and began to make fun of her brother, because according to imperial laws, they would not be able to marry while they were close relatives. Orsini grew dark with each new word Kana said, but the last straw of his patience was the way the girl cheerfully announced that she was already married. Kana tried to say something else caustic to her brother, but he abruptly grabbed her forearms. With rage, he squeezed the girl's body so hard that he definitely left bruises on her skin. But he didn't care. He threatened that he would definitely kill her after this. Kana did not fall for these threats for a long time, so she did not miss the moment and asked Orsini to finally fulfill her promise, which caused the guy to panic. Orsini stopped shaking the girl. She reminded him of the past and that now he was much softer than in childhood. Catching the guy's confusion, the girl reached for his face with her palm to attract his gaze. Lightly wrapping her hand around her brother's cheek, the girl asked him to do the same as always, to bring her to tears and broken lips. Moving her hand from the guy's face to his collarbone, the girl again asked him to remember the past and not to leave a living place on her body. Noticing that the guy was not moving, the girl pulled him to her jacket with a sharp movement, giving him the opportunity to act as always. In the imperial palace, the celebration continued, while the tragedy flared up in the garden. Kana tested her brother's patience. She reminded him of his own words when he promised to hug her only when she was good enough for him. But silence and inaction irritated her. She wished that Orsini would act as usual, to go berserk to the point of redness in his eyes. Something strange was going on between them, and his brother's inhibited reaction did not indicate that he wanted revenge on Kana for the shame he had experienced. Although Orsini was holding Kana, in reality, the guy thought that he was the one who fell into her trap, so he chuckled and tried to make his voice relaxed when he called the girl dirt. However, his throat tightened and prevented him from shouting more offensive words than he had already uttered. Not wanting to put up with the situation, the guy shook the girl's body and hinted that he was able to come up with a more sophisticated plan to deceive than she did. The girl's calmness amazed him, but the freedom she could touch him made the guy panic. Catching her brother's timid look, the girl cheerfully stated that it was she who had now achieved success in their long-term confrontation. The guy fearfully threw the girl's hand aside. He hissed venomously that girls like Kana would never interest anyone. But Orsini could not restrain himself and sent the girl's body to the ground with a strong push. The guy was trembling, but it was not characteristic of him. A few years ago, he would have used his fists, but now he was afraid to even push the girl too hard. Crouching on the grass, Canna looked at the trail of Orsini, who, ignoring her, turned his back. The girl was amazed that he would just leave, without even shouting more curses at her after the shame she had poured out on him. Canna knew that Orsini became more aggressive after drinking, but his behavior surprised her, and she could do nothing but silence. Orsini left, and Canna lay down back on the ground. After all the effort she made, she still did not get the reaction to which she wanted to bring her brother. She wanted Orsini to swing his fist so that there would be a mark on her skin that the guy would have seen for a long time when he met her at the Otis estate. And after such an injury, she would go to her father and complain about the attack by her brother, because of which the Duke definitely had to allow him to leave the mansion. Bruises left by her brother's fingers on her shoulders would not be suitable as evidence of an attack, and besides, they healed very quickly. Groaning in annoyance, the girl no longer harbored hopes that this evening could somehow get worse. But there was one thing that gave her pleasure: the face of Orsini at the moment when he realized how cruelly he had been played, and who wanted to burn with shame. After sitting on the grass for a while, the girl realized that this result would be enough for her to get rid of Orsini for a while. From the long lying on the ground, the girl's entire dress was covered with small leaves of grass. As she was about to clean it, she heard the soft rustle of grass behind her. On the other side of the clearing, illuminated by the moonlight, stood Duke Valentino. His face was impassive, although his very appearance to meet Canna looked doubtful. The Duke's presence was sudden, so she couldn't figure out how much he was already worth and how much he had seen lately. The silence between the spouses did not disappear. While the girl was worried about whether he saw something unnecessary, the man calmly examined her. Canna was not in the mood for a conversation. Getting up from the ground, she headed for the exit from the garden, when suddenly the voice of the Duke was heard, who said that there was still grass left on her dress. The girl froze in place. The whole situation was different from those in which she and the Duke had been. Slowly turning around, the girl wanted to make sure that Duke Valentino was really standing in front of her. After all, the fact that the man said something in her direction for the first time alerted Canna very much. According to Li Juhua, in all 7 years of marriage, the Duke was always the person who answers and does not start the conversation first. And the fact that now he decided to talk about weed was an incredible event in the life of this married couple. In order not to look stupid, the girl decided to inspect the dress, although she assumed that the Duke had started the conversation for personal reasons. But she didn't see any foreign leaves on the silk fabric, so when the man headed in her direction, she became wary. The Duke was calm when he approached his wife. To some extent, he even liked to pay attention to the girl. Canna felt a weightless touch go over her back, and this frightened her, because Silvian Valentino had never touched her himself. Jumping away from the man, the girl demanded an explanation of what he decided to do behind her back. But the Duke calmly showed the leaf of grass held in his fingers, which he had just taken from his wife's dress. Canna walked a few steps away from the Duke and asked him not to do such things next time. All the man's patience was gone. He threw away the sheet and caustically noticed that the man who was with his wife did not even bother to clean up after himself. The Duke was not kind. He bluntly said that Lady Canna had terrible taste in men, since their secret meeting was so tense. Canna was alarmed. She could not believe that the Duke had not really recognized Orsini when he left the garden. Although bright orange hair was a hallmark of the Otis family, it is very difficult not to recognize Orsini, because he is the best swordsman in the Empire, who sometimes goes with Duke Valentino to fight the Black Fog. The situation looked absurd, and Canna refused to believe in such fortunate coincidences. Up until that point, Silvian Valentino had kept Canna by his side only so that she would scare away other women who dream of marrying him. But everything changed, and a series of fears began in Valentino's estate because of Canna's behavior. Therefore, Herzog should be more careful, because a scandal can always break out, in the epicenter of which will be the Valentino family. And the result of the Duke's anger may be that he will need to replace his wife, who discredited the name of the ancient family. If Silvian Valentino requested a divorce, then Duke Addis would not dare to refuse as he did for his daughter. After weighing all the chances, the girl came close to her husband and said that her taste in men was very bad, because of him, she was married. The girl tried to look innocent when the Duke understood her game and began to ask counter questions about whether his wife admitted that her taste was bad at everything. The man took liberties. He touched the girl's cheek and asked with a smile what it was like to meet a strange man in the garden, after which the ground was a mess and her dress was crumpled. Sylvian liked the momentary confusion on Canna's face. He openly hinted at infidelity, but she still restrained herself from a scandal. The game had just begun. Canna realized that her husband had seen an ulterior motive in which she wanted to portray herself as a cheater, so she decided to take advantage of the situation with Orsini until the very end. The girl asked her husband not to interfere in her life because he never found time for such a pathetic person as her. Sylvian removed his hand from the girl's face. He calmly assured her that he did not care what Lady Canna was doing, but that the honor of the Valentino family should be treated very carefully. Hovering over the girl, the Duke hinted that she should better understand the rules of the game, because now they are on public display, and developing infidelity on the lawn is akin only to animals. His words took the girl by surprise. She did not quite understand his analogy with animals in the open air. Each new word hit the girl's calmness, because now the man openly spoke about how she did not behave like a noble lady. Canna was pretending, in fact. She wanted to provoke her husband into coming to the decision to divorce himself soon. But the fact that he dared to accuse her of dirty deeds, while he himself had never touched her body, angered the girl. On their wedding night, Li Juhua sat for hours waiting for her husband, who never came to see her. And even at the moment when the body swap took place and Canna was injured by her mother-in-law, the Duke did not come to visit her. This man has never treated her as an equal, so he should not touch on the topic of nobility, which he does not possess in the proper measure. There was no point in hiding her worries. The girl bluntly stated that she had lived all 7 years of marriage without her husband, who was afraid to take responsibility for their union. Such audacity was new to the Duke, so he silently listened to the accusations that had been brewing in his wife for many years. Covering his eyes with his palm, the man decided that he understood what his wife's true offense was. Looking down into her eyes, he voiced the dirty truth about their union, and asked the girl to confirm if it was really all due to the fact that he did not let Lady Canna into his bed. Canna felt embarrassed. She had a greater opinion of her husband's logical abilities, so now everything seemed like a stupid joke. In her heart, Canna laughed with the Duke's confidence, but with calmness, she assured him that she was not bothered by her nights together with her husband. The Duke recalled the embarrassing situation with their wedding night, when Canna herself showed up naked in his bedroom, although the girl was ashamed of Li Juhua's actions. But now she had to convince the Duke that her past actions did not bother her. Pointing her finger at the man's chest, she stated that after all the bad nights, she realized that the Duke was not able to fulfill his marital duty. Sylvian narrowed his eyes. He did not like such conclusions, and he demanded to know what his wife meant by his incompetence. Canna was having fun. She pretended to be worried and stated that due to the huge time at work, the Duke's body was very tired. The girl knew that this would hurt the man's confidence very much, but he was the first to start their war. Therefore, throwing her doubts out of her mind, she admitted that she had long realized that the Duke did not have the strength that was so necessary at a young age. At some point, Canna could cross the line, but she was already unstoppable. She admitted that she was sorry that the Duke hid such a fact before the wedding, but since they were married, she would hide it and not spread gossip. And in order to make the final blow, the girl declared that if she had known about everything earlier, she would never have entered into a marital union with Sylvian Valentino. The Duke listened to his wife's monologue. He did not react to it in any way, although he was surprised that now she treats him differently. However, from the relaxation in the man's body, Canna was not sure that she had achieved the result she wanted. And she was right when he said that after hearing this, he hoped that Canna would understand his refusal not to convince her about his male strength. The pride in Silyevna's eyes made him angry. He really decided that everything that Canna said to him was only due to the fact that she wanted to incite him to act. Now she could no longer walk around the main goal. She decided to be firm. The girl said that her actions are now aimed at getting a divorce, which Duke Addis rejected, and Sylvian Valentino should not think that everything is happening in order to drag him into his wife's bed. Emotions got the better of the girl. She demanded not to treat her lightly, because in the near future, she would still make sure that their marriage would be over. Bypassing the girl, he decided to end the conversation, still not believing that what had happened was not attracting attention, so there was no point in him staying any longer. Kana gave him an angry look, but the man walked towards the stairs to the palace without looking back in her direction. When a new day came, Kana was very glad that everything that happened at the banquet was left behind, because there were too many events for the first outing. The girl had been working in the laboratory since the morning when Ree brought the news that Orsini had left the estate to train alone with a sword. Kana was surprised that her brother left home early in the morning, although according to Ree's story, he should not study with the sword on his own, because he has the status of a master and not a novice student. Orsini was the best swordmaster in the empire, so his ego wouldn't allow him to go to solo training. And Kana knew that the guy had such a strong sense of shame that he couldn't even be in the same house with her. One of the maids came to the laboratory and said that a guest was waiting for Duchess Valentino in the living room. The girl's mood was high because of the news about Orsini, that she did not even immediately realize that no guests were waiting for her. When Kana went up to the living room, she was stunned by the sight of the guest who visited her. Argon Iseberg sat in the chair and had been waiting for the girl for some time. The wait was beginning to irritate him, so he reproached Kana for it, albeit gently. Although the maid managed to report the prince's visit, Kana could not understand the true motives for his visit. She has no relationship with the prince, and the friendly behavior of the guy alarmed her. When Argon came closer, he could not restrain himself and picked up the girl's palm in his, because after the banquet, he had a lot of thoughts about the beauty of the eldest daughter of the Addis family. Without hesitation, the guy kissed the girl's hand and tried to make her happy with a compliment about her beauty. Kana didn't know how to react to such a close greeting, so she limited herself to dry gratitude. Maybe the prince expected to win the girl's heart with compliments, but his gaze in her direction was more stressful than disposing to acquaintance. Argon asked Kana to get ready so that they could go to the imperial palace to meet the empress and the first princess. The girl asked for some time, but the prince again inappropriately joked that the expectation of beauties excites him, so the duchess can take her time. The prince left the estate to wait for Kana in the courtyard, where his assistants were preparing the carriage for the return journey. When Kana returned to him, he was surprised that she was ready to go without a servant. It was strange to her that members of the imperial family could safely move around unguarded in a carriage alone. The prince's attention shifted from Kana to her bag, where many decoctions were prepared. The girl did not feel comfortable next to the prince, and there was no desire to communicate with him for a long time. As soon as she dryly answered his question, the prince immediately stepped back and said that he would be reading a book on the way, and such a quick retreat made her even more alarmed. The prince was Lillian's older brother, and after meeting the princess at a banquet, Kana was sure that all relatives had a bad temper. But Argon tried to look friendly, and in the appearance of the guy, the girl saw more resemblance to his mother than to the princess, so she hoped that their trip would be safe. The carriage drove slowly along the forest road that led towards the imperial palace. The silence continued as Kana watched the changing scenery through the window, the prince pretending to be completely absorbed in reading a book. From time to time, Kana glanced at the prince. She did not understand why the son of the concubine was sent for her, and not one of the empress's servants. Treating the first princess is a delicate matter, and sending the son of a concubine who is vying with the empress for the child's place on the throne is very imprudent. The girl was distracted from her thoughts by the loud bang of a closed book and the dubious question of the prince, who was interested in what was bothering Kana. The carriage continued to drive through the forest, so Kana could not hide anywhere, and it was necessary to enter into a dialogue. The guy said that there were discussions in the palace about how Kana burst into tears at a banquet after the second princess yelled at the duchess. The prince's actions contradicted his promises. He stopped reading the book and now focused all his attention on the discussion of the past banquet. The guy laughed. He himself wanted to see the crying duchess, but at the time of the quarrel, he was on the balcony. Then he opened the books again and continued reading. But the quick phrase that he would soon see the girl's tears frightened Kana. Silence hung in the carriage. Even the noise of the forest was not heard, which added to the situation of great danger. There were rumors that the first prince was an eccentric, who sometimes did things that could hurt other people. Suddenly the carriage stopped abruptly, and there was a nasty creak of wheels that echoed through the forest. Kana lost her balance from the surprise, but she did not have time to grab anything. The carriage shook more violently, so you could see fright in the girl's eyes. Then, the Duchess's wrist was squeezed, not allowing her to move, when the shaking subsided a little. With a sharp jerk of his hand, the prince pulled the girl to his chest and squeezed her in his arms. The guy tried to look worried, according to him.
Like this video. Hit the like button and subscribe for more videos.